You hear so many people talk about, mainstream science needs this, and mainstream science is not going to recognize until this, and blah, blah, blah. And mainstream science, who cares? Who cares about mainstream science? Okay? They have their opinions and their beliefs just like we have ours, and, move on. Don't let that discourage your research, and don't let that be the only reason why you're conducting research. My name is Shane Land. I usually go by L.Shane Land. I served in the U.S. military for a total of, I suppose it's probably a total of a little over 16 years between active guard and reserve. And I worked for the federal government after that for a couple of years. Background in intelligence analysis, intelligence collection. Served in the Air Force and the U.S. Army both. Security specialist in the Air Force, and then in the Army I was an intelligence analyst and combat medic. And then I got to be part of a special project in Afghanistan with the Department of the Army, which took me over there for quite a while. I really enjoyed that though. And then did a tour in Iraq in 05 and 06 in uniform as a medic and analyst. The sighting I had in 2018, I actually did not see it first. I had some relatives up here, and they had brought along a couple of friends that were sisters as well. And one of the sisters and I were walking back towards the vehicle at Independence Mine, and she looked up along the ridge line and said, "What's that?" And I was like, "What's what?" And she said, "What's that?" And so I kind of looked up and saw this being walking with no issues at all across some pretty steep and treacherous terrain, about to kind of crest a ridge line. And so I ran around to my driver's side to pull out my binoculars, and by the time I got through fumbling through all that and looked up, it was gone. It already crested the ridge line and walked off into what I guess were some trees. And I was kind of able to gauge the size of those trees with my thumb by measuring one of the buildings at Independence Mine, one of the doors, and I brought it back over to the tree. And this being was every bit of a third as tall as those trees, and I kind of gauged the tree to be anywhere between 24 or 26 feet tall. So this thing was big, and I knew that, not really thinking of Sasquatch or Bigfoot at all in Alaska, had never thought about it before ever to that point. And so, going home, we kind of talked about it a little bit on the way home. There were some chuckles and laughs and giggles, and but then it kind of bothered me the whole way home. And then when I got home and shared it, that's what really pulled me in. And so I just kind of started, if I was going to do an analysis on anything, you start with your basic research. What is it? What could it be? Watched every documentary I could find. Obviously, there's numerous documentaries out there, read numerous books, went to a couple of conferences down in Washington State, where I met some fantastic people that took me under their wing and have been mentors to me in this process. And so I still wasn't ready prior to going to the second conference. I still wasn't ready to admit to what I thought I had seen. Even after all the research, I still wasn't ready to admit that. And it wasn't until I met a fellow named Joe Hauser and Ron Moorhead that, I kind of had what I call those aha moments. And after talking to them, it was like, what you've seen, just admit to what you've seen, and that's when you kind of realize that it's really okay. You're not out there alone in this endeavor or this belief. There are a lot of people out there that basically went through the same thing. When it happens, you don't want to believe it, and then the more research you do, the more analysis you do, the more people you meet, and to include people in science. that even though mainstream science is not ready to admit to it yet, if they ever will, I don't think that they will in our lifetime, but you still meet people out there in science that will talk to you, and they also have a belief. And so, and that's when you kind of realize, hey, it's okay. It's okay. And then you move forward from there. That's when the real questions start. By sheer dumb luck, I got into metaphysics. I was familiar with Aristotle's metaphysics, his writings, already familiar with that. But I think a lot of people, when they think of metaphysics, they think of, things other than philosophical writings. They think of the supernatural, stuff like that. I don't go at it from that supernatural perspective. I go at it from the perspective of what is, what could be, what might be, based on the knowledge we have, what we learn about it. Could it be? But yeah, the way I got into it was, went online and was looking for a program that would kind of tie into this whole Bigfoot cryptid research. And I was lucky to find one out of Florida. I was very hesitant at first, but I committed to it. It was a lot of hard work. I often joke that my entire college education took me 33 years to complete because, I finished high school in '88 and then college off and on and the military, and so 33 years later I finally finished my degrees, but metaphysics has been very very eye-opening, and I think it goes tremendously well with the question of whether it be Bigfoot or any other cryptid. I think it definitely applies, and it's everybody that gets into Bigfoot research or any other cryptid research has obviously gotten into it with an open mind. And so I think that's one thing with metaphysics, is that you have to approach that topic itself, not to, and to include Aristotle's writings, with an open mind. How do I feel about the term woo? I think, in all honesty, I think it's a very derogatory term. Some people use it jokingly, but I've more often than not, heard it used in a very derogatory manner. And I think that it's often utilized as a spear to hurl at others. And I think that's one of the biggest things in the field of Bigfoot research. I think that some of the biggest critics in Bigfoot research of Bigfoot researchers are other Bigfoot researchers. And, if we all had the answer or answers, then problem solved, right? But we don't all have those answers. And so why shouldn't we examine all the evidence, all the theories, any hypothesis, anything that supports the possibility or the probability of existence? I think that would be one thing that if we could just come to the conclusion that we can all agree to disagree, but that nobody's research is wrong until we definitively know one way or the other, I think that we would get a lot farther in Bigfoot research. My research philosophy is I'm a bit of a pit bull. When I grasp onto something, I usually don't let it go. And I think you can't really go into this type of research, or any other cryptid for that matter, whether you can't go into it half-heartedly. If you go into it half-heartedly and you already have a predetermined outcome that you're trying to meet, then you're not going to generate the type of questions that you need to generate in your research. I think good research questions should generate more questions and better questions. And whether you get the answers that you're looking for or you don't get the answers, it's all research. And I think research is shareable, and it should be shareable in this field. Some people will not share their research with you for anything, and it's very something that could happen down in Georgia or North Carolina or Oregon or anywhere might be applicable to something that has happened here in Alaska. It could tell us, it could give us a little bit of insight, a little bit more insight into these beings, and their characteristics, their intelligence levels, their sentience, you know, um, but they always seem to stay, obviously we've always heard the stories about, they stay just outside the campfire light. Well, a lot of researchers do the same thing. They'll stay just outside the campfire light, and chances are they have some fantastic information to share in much the same way that a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch might with us if we would just step inside the light. How does science and government work together? Well, government provides money, science provides research and answers back to government. It's a cycle. They don't always see eye to eye on everything, obviously. One of the best things right now that proves how government and science work together is for how many decades have we been going now about the denial of UFOs or UAPs, and now the government in the last few years has come forward and said there's something, we're not ready to commit to saying that it's alien or extraterrestrial, but at the same time they haven't committed to not doing that either. There's something there that we don't know about. And I think that with this question, as I discussed previously, I don't think that, in my opinion, the Bigfoot question of what is Bigfoot, is it science gone awry? Is it some experimentation that, yielded this? I don't think that. I don't think, can I say DARPA? Can I say DARPA? I don't think DARPA has gotten involved and produced some, genetic anomaly that they were trying to construct for warfare or something like that. I don't believe that personally. There are some people out there that do, especially a lot of people that have had encounters around some, military installations, classified facilities, places like that. And that could be led into that direction. I mean, should it be a consideration? I personally don't think so. I think it's just more, and I hate to use the word coincidence because I don't believe in coincidence, but maybe it just was there outside the light again, wanting to see what was going on. Curiosity. Cryptid species are discovered every year. Every year. Now, unless the U.S. government knows something definitively that they're withholding from the public, because we know that they don't ever do that, hence the UFO, UAP. But I think, if there was an apex predator walking around North America alone, chances are, I would say 50-50. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. There are apex predators walking around society that the government doesn't know exists. So when you kind of throw that to the wall and say this species has been effectively hiding or remained hidden for decades, and how would you know, using the term apex predator, that it actually is an apex predator? The theory on how Bigfoot might cloak is just that. I don't even know that you can call it a theory. You hear people telling stories about seeing it happen. One way that I kind of looked at that and kind of examined that topic was, had to deal with vibrational frequency. Ron Moorhead and I discussed this, at length. Love Ron Moorhead, fantastic guy, extremely intelligent. But if everything has a vibrational frequency, a resonating frequency, something that stands to be that big, obviously that much more blood volume, larger heart, the electrical conductivity through that entire body of something 8.5 feet tall, 700 plus pounds. You know, I think that maybe one way to look at it would be that maybe they don't actually disappear if they cloak. I think that perhaps maybe when they are in a fight or flight mode, they feel threatened, whatever the case might be, an adrenaline rush. If they are able to cloak and have that ability to do so, maybe that when those things happen and their internal vibrational frequency raises, that perhaps maybe they simply go outside of our visual spectrum. That was one consideration that I looked at. There's nothing, you know, there's no definitive proof one way or the other. I've never witnessed it. I've talked to a couple of people who say they have. You see photos. But until, in my opinion, until I would see something do that, whether it's me or you or, you know, a Sasquatch, you know, that again is another question that we have to continue considering and potentially researching if more evidence comes to light to support that. So like the externally projected energy, I think that if you have people that have been in martial arts, you know, you talk about your ki or your chi, right? That center where you can feel your energy. I think people have developed the ability to project that. People that are in a keto or hapkido you'll see a lot of times if they shake hands, they shake and they have their finger, they'll shake hands with their finger like this, okay? And they view that as a projection of their energy. I could show any of you here how I could put my hand on your shoulder and just hold it like this regularly and try to stiffen my arm and stop you from bending my arm, but I couldn't do it. But the minute I put my finger out like that, you can't bend it. You couldn't, your husband couldn't do it to you. It's very strange, and I'll show you guys that afterwards. But I didn't believe it until I saw it. But I think that that's a projection of energy. Are you referring to like hearing people say they've been zapped? I could say possibly. I mean, we know other animals that have infrasound. Who's to say that this species doesn't have it as well? I mean, we have no idea how evolved this species is from back when it was very first time it was ever seen. So I don't know about the zapping, or I know I did have an experience down in Sitka. My wife and I were down there for a wilderness medical course, and we had gone hiking one day, and I guess we'd been hiking for probably a half hour. We came out into this one area. Everything was really green, but it was kind of in a bowl. You know, the trail went through, and it was going back to a waterfall. And we came out in this bowl, and I just remember everything being so green. And but again, it was kind of in a bowl. And we took like 5 or 6 steps, and we both kind of stopped. And I was like, "Do you feel that?" And she was like, "Yeah." I'm like, "What are you feeling?" She's like, "I don't know. It feels like something like there's like a wall or something in front of us." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You know, I'm like, I don't know, maybe we're just, you know." So we took like 5 or 6 more steps, and it felt like we walked into this wall, literally walked into this wall of energy. And both of us at the same time, you know, hair goes up on the arms, back of the neck, the whole 9 yards. And we both looked at each other and was like, something doesn't want us here, you know, but what is it? You know, this happened before my sighting. So, you know, wasn't thinking Bigfoot, anything like that. So we tried to walk another 10 steps, and it just got this overwhelming feeling of dread, like before you cross into that fear level, you just had this feeling that that's as far as we go. And we turned around and left and walked out. And it literally took coming probably another back out, probably a good 400 plus feet back down the trail before we actually got outside of that feeling. And then when we got outside of it, it was just gone. Now, I don't know if that was anything that, but for both of us to have felt it simultaneously and have the same feelings, there was something that, we never saw anything. We never saw a bear, which is kind of what both of us thought. Maybe we're just sensing a bear or something that, and because you're back up in the middle of nowhere, so your senses are kind of heightened and everything. But could that have had something to do with vibrational frequency? Possibly. Could it had something to do with the vibrational frequency of a Bigfoot? Possibly. I kind of chalk it up to the vibrational frequency of we had been walking through an area that was, not as green, and then walked out into this big area that was completely green, teeming with life. Maybe the vibrational frequency of that area is what we felt, and maybe that was what it was. I don't think that there's a reason to kill one for the sake of science. I think it has to do with respect, and we can learn a lot about them, and we don't need one on a table, having some type of autopsy performed to still respect them as beings, whether they are people or not. That's a tough question. I don't know. I think that they have a lot of people-like characteristics. I think when you hear stories of people's encounters and what they look like, and that they're as different as you or I in their characteristics, they have that gives them individuality. That makes them a lot like us in a lot of ways, because we're all individuals, in multiple ways, whether it be the way we look, which is the obvious, the way we act, the way we walk, talk, interact with others. So I think that they deserved that respect, just as we would respect any other group of people. But then again, you have the disrespect factor too, that you can't simply do away with the disrespect factor, because we also disrespect our fellow human being, as if it's nothing. So if we can't learn to respect ourselves and respect others, then is there any hope for respecting them until we find out more about them? You have to identify as a group of collective researchers. As I stated earlier, some of the biggest critics of Bigfoot researchers are Bigfoot researchers. And I think until we can identify as that group, that tribe, if you will, as long as we keep withholding research findings, evidence, getting past and over that hump of wanting to be the one that makes the discovery, I think that would be, in my opinion, the next logical step that I would hope the research community could take. Because you have all these conferences that people go to, the summits and, the Squatch Fests and, the Primal People, and there's so much knowledge out there about this, and I've only scratched the surface on it, and in doing so, just in scratching the surface, it actually in some ways made me pull back from it. Not to get caught up in a lot of the side drama that goes on, but that's what I'd really like to see across the community is if they could unify just even 60 to 80%. I think that would open up a lot of people's eyes outside the community to what the people inside the community are trying to convey. Well, I don't know that there's a missing part of the conversation, but I tell you one part of the conversation that everybody, in my opinion, just needs to do away with and say, who cares? Is mainstream science recognition. Who cares? You're doing your research. If, like Aristotle says, don't believe everything you hear is truth. Be critical, evaluate what you believe in, not what they believe in. We already know their perspective. We already know their position, and like I said earlier, they're probably not ever going to recognize this being or this species in our time. Again, look how long it took them with the UFO UAPs. So too much, too fast, could be too little, too late, perhaps. But I think that if everybody would, because you hear so many people talk about, mainstream science needs this, and mainstream science is not going to recognize until this, and blah, blah, blah. And mainstream science, who cares? Who cares about mainstream science? Okay? They have their opinions and their beliefs just like we have ours, and, move on. Don't let that discourage your research, and don't let that be the only reason why you're conducting research. Because if you go out there and try to do it, it's never going to happen. Another thing that I would really like to see happen more so is approach of the Native American tribes, and trying to convince them to assist in moving this forward, because a lot of the tribes across North America all recognize this being in some way, be it malevolent or benevolent. And if we can do something that they recognize culturally and sometimes religiously, all right? If they recognize it culturally, and this goes back to science and government, they recognize it culturally, then if we can push it forward from a cultural perspective, a cultural Native American perspective, if you can push it forward, then the government will get involved through initially the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Department of Interior, stuff like that, because now you're not going to tread upon their culture and their religious beliefs. We tried that a long time ago, and as bad as it got, they still hold tight to their beliefs. But this is a way forward, I believe, through the Native American tribes uniting or providing some type of unification, and us supporting them, not them supporting us. We need to support them in their push to identify a species and protect a species. The science that we don't understand, paranormal, above normal, but the problem is that there's such a stigma associated with that term, just like there's a stigma associated with metaphysical. People think metaphysics or metaphysical, and they think, different types of rocks or gemstones or, and all that stuff. Well, yeah, it's that also, of course, but don't limit yourself, because if you limit yourself metaphysically, then you're not going to see what might be right in front of your nose. Don't put that limitation on yourself. Look past it. Look through the trees and into the forest. And that's, if you want to get away from the word paranormal, I think there is a time and a place to use that term, for sure. When you start talking about, people who have witnessed orbs, or what, a UFO, shortly after a Bigfoot sighting, or shortly before, or orbs shortly after, or shortly before. Is that paranormal? Well, I guess I would ask the question, is that paranormal for Bigfoot? Or is that something that could be normal? Maybe there's something associated with that behavior. Who knows? Maybe it has something to do with that, projected energy that's being seen by something with such a high vibrational frequency. Okay, so, you know, I, I just, something that we don't yet understand. Yet being the key word. But you have to, if you want to understand it, you have to seek the knowledge to do so. And if you limit yourself, you're never going to get there. So Dr. J. Allen Hynek was also was the scientist on Project Blue Book, going back to the UFO files, Project Sign, Grudge, Blue Book, all those. But J. Allen Hynek was, astrophysicist and just such an intelligent young man. But he stated ridicule is not part of the scientific method, and the public should not be taught that it is. I think we often forget where we come from. I think ridicule has, not only in the scientific method, but I think ridicule has actually become the norm instead of encouragement and encouraging people to do things. It's far easier to ridicule them for what they're doing or what they've done. Every failure, in my opinion, is an opportunity to learn. It's a learning process. And if you don't fail 100 times, then how are you going to learn that once? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? Well, failure doesn't mean doing it over and over again, the same thing. It means trying something a different way. Maybe you get to the end and nothing changes. The results are the same because you don't produce the desired outcome, but you didn't do the same thing over and over again. You tried different methodology. Somebody could look at that and say, it's wasting his time. Quit wasting your time, quit wasting my time, quit wasting, your research money and time. How many times did Colonel Sanders fail before he finally sold his recipe? More than 100 times. But somebody took a chance, right? Somebody took a chance. And I'm sure he got ridiculed for it. And I think also is that you have to have a very thick skin in this field, or any field of cryptozoology for that matter. You have to have a very thick skin, and you have to have belief in yourself. No matter how difficult it gets, you have to believe in yourself. And there's a saying that the most powerful thing in the universe is a belief.